my career has been in financial advice for almost a decade now. And I was a financial journalist. I was writing lots and lots of personal finance articles, trying to give people financial advice. And just over time, you just become more aware of the fact that people are struggling with their money. We have more access to financial information than ever
Mm-hmm.
before. And yet, people keep struggling. People feel like they can't get ahead. And so it had me thinking a lot about, it's maybe not a literacy issue, right? Maybe there's something kind of greater going on. And so, kind of the two pieces that I sort of identified was one, just the policies and products that are set up, the way that money is set up in our world makes it extremely hard to build wealth and get ahead. And I think a lot of financial advice sort of ignores our current reality in that way. And the second piece is also so much of our money decisions is behavioral. I think people think about money in this like very cold, rational, objective way, like it's numbers, right? But it really is so emotional. It's often
Mm-hmm.
wrapped up in our sense of self and how we want other people to perceive us. And again, so much of it is behavioral. So something that I've really tried to do in my work is one, point to the kind of psychological side of money, like why we make the money decisions we do. Um, you know, Shifting away from the kind of like shame and blame financial advice or like the laundry list, because again, it's so personal to you and it's all about kind of finding your own relationship with money, and then also pointing to the larger structural forces that often influence our money decisions, often for the worse. So that informs a lot of the work that I'm doing.
Right.
Love that.
S- Adi.
We're gonna dive deeper. Why are girl bosses and trad wives the same thing?
Yeah, so this was a newsletter that I actually wrote earlier this week. And basically the kind of thesis for this and is it kind of strings along a lot of the other work I write, which is, so much of our environment, our cultural forces, society, the people we interact with just influences the way that we perceive money and the way that we spend money. And that article specifically was about kind of women's role when it came
Mm-hmm.
to money, and how so much of the cultural conditioning around women and money are really just designed to not have women take autonomy over their money. So, you take something like a trad wife, this kind of desire of like, I'm getting super burnt out from capitalism. I just want to like go on the homestead and, raise a bunch of kids and, take care of a house and relax. And like, again, and I said this in my newsletter, totally fine if that's what you want to do. But at the same time, there is this undercurrent of like financial dependency and like the actual role that plays. And I think especially in today's climate, it's being a trad wife is, or being in a traditional kind of home, is being painted as like this kind of financial freedom for
Mm-hmm.
women, when in a lot of ways it's not at all. And I think the girl boss is kind of quite similar in that you're still kind of operating under the like kind of guise of capitalism and the desire to like maximize everything you do and make as much money as possible. And it kind of feeds into what I see also a lot in today's world of what I call like the bimbofication of money.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever seen those ads like on Instagram that's like, it's time to invest like a girl, like, like come join us, like we're just girls who love to invest, like like he it's like girl math. And it's like, oh my god, like this is the same problem. Like it's again, it's like the infantilizing of women and this
Mm-hmm.
idea that women like need permission from other people, specifically men, to get involved in investing and
Hmm.
manage their own finances, or they need someone else to save them, or they're like not smart enough or proactive enough to really take advantage of their finances. So they need to either depend on another man to make all the money, or they need to like girl boss their way to the sun. So again, it's like very interesting to think about like these cultural forces that shape how
Hmm.
we perceive money, because that affects kind of your entire life. If you're constantly feeling like, oh, I'm just a girl, like I don't need to learn how to invest, or like investing is for men, that directly affects your wealth over time. Yeah.
Right. I can definitely see how passionate you are about this topic, and I'm loving. I can. I'm like 10,000 kilometers away, and I can feel the energy coming through the screen. Um, so going back to the trad wife concept, is
Mm.
that even like something that is like societally feasible these days? Because for you to rely on just your husband for one source of income to actually support the whole family and build that family, these days in this current
Totally.
economy, that's basically impossible. You're basically trying to aim for a life. You're basically trying to find a husband from a wealthy family, which is, statistically very low. Which is, and it's,
Yeah.
I doubt people are actually succeeding in being trad wives. So
Yeah. And you know what's
I don't
so
know.
ironic about that? Sorry, no, no, is one, again, this also feeds into the, I don't know if you've ever seen like also social media posts that are like, where to find a rich man
Mm.
in this, and it's like,
Dating
and
app.
again,
Hmm.
this always drives me nuts because someone's net worth has almost no bearing on like who they are as a person. And so like
Right.
even if you are making a lot of money, you could have a ton of other issues. You could even be bad at you could be bad at money and make a ton of money. Like
Hmm.
there are plenty of people making 200K living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, it really has no bearing on how you actually manage your money. But what the other really, really ironic part of the whole tradwife thing, if you think about the very popular social media creators that model a tradwife lifestyle, they a lot of times are the primary breadwinners in their households because they are doing content creation as a career. So they
Mm.
actually are making a lot of money and having a career. So in a way,
Mm,
that whole perception of like, oh, I'm going to be a trad wife and like, look at what they're doing. Their lives look so peaceful. They're working. They are working. It just like
hmm
it might not look like, the way you would imagine, somebody normally working, but that is really what they're doing. So again, it's like it all feeds into this idea of social media where like, you know, psychologically our brains, if you're seeing the same thing over and over and over again on social media, sometimes it becomes hard to know what is actually fact and what is fiction. And it is so easy to fake a life online. It is so
Wow.
easy to fake wealth online.
Hmm.
And I think
Right.
a lot of people, don't always realize how much of, a rich person's lifestyle that they see online is funded by credit card debt, I don't know, funded by like working 80 hours a week. Like you just don't know. And so again, like our reference point for what is considered normal has drastically shifted over time because of social media. I think there was a survey that came out that was basically saying like Gen Z, in order, for them to feel financially successful, they said they needed to be making like almost $600,000 a year, and they needed a net worth of $10 million
Oh
or
my
like
God.
$9.5 million, which is, we all know on this call, not feasible for the vast majority of people. Like it is very, very unlikely. I mean,
How?
great if that happens to you. Very unlikely if that is going to be kind of your lived reality, especially in kind of the younger years of your life. So again, that reference point, because you think that, that skews how you perceive one, your own money, even if you're
Hmm.
doing relatively fine, and how you perceive the larger economy and like what you think is feasible. And again, this gets back to this idea that I write a lot about of like, the number is not the point. Money is a tool to give us the life that we want. And $9.5 million might not actually be the amount of money you need to live a good life. It could be way below that. And so again, I think people anchor themselves to these numbers or to these material items as like, okay, this is when I will have achieved happiness and success. And it's so divorced from their actual values and what they actually want to get out of life. And so that's why there's this continual disconnect that people feel with their money, because they're like, I'm making money, but I'm not actually happier, because
Right.
a lot of times they're not spending it in an intentional way that aligns with their values.
Money psychology. That's where the psychology
Yeah.
aspect comes in. You can have a lot of money and feel poor, and you can have little money and feel rich, right? It's like your
Yeah.
mental state. Um,
Yeah.
what do you advise women then? You said not trad wives, not boss ladies. Um, what's another alternative then?
Yeah, totally. So I would say the alternative is like your path. And again, like it comes back to like, you can be a girl boss. If that's like, if working really hard is really important to you and that brings you a lot of fulfillment, oh my God, go do your thing. Right. But a lot of time it comes back to like understanding like, what do I actually want to get out of life? Is it flexibility? Is it stability? Like, what are those things that I really care about? And then once you kind of have a good idea of what those values are, you can use money to kind of inform kind of how you want to live out those values. Something I also want to touch on that I think is really important for women, because women actually make up the largest, like the vast majority of consumer spending,
Mm.
especially like consumer products.
Hmm.
Um, so much of these movements, like tradwife movement, girl, it's just propped up by consumerism. Like
Mm.
these companies are spending millions and millions of dollars to try to influence you to buy something. Like if you even look at like how creators that like model the tradwife lifestyle, they are often pushing I don't know, clothes, products, etc., to
Oh,
get you to buy them. Like they are selling an aspirational lifestyle that doesn't actually exist to get you to spend money. So something that's really important for women is being aware of these forces that are basically just pushing you to purchase things. And this goes back to like, once you have your values, once you understand how you want to spend money, a lot of times you can find yourself kind of putting up those guardrails and saying like, this like $800 kitchen mixer is probably not going to make me happy. Like I probably don't need to buy this, right? So again, it like just comes back to like knowing yourself. And again, like people have to understand like these companies are spending millions and millions of dollars on like behavioral psychology to get you to spend money. So like
oof.
your brain is trying to work against these giant corporations doing that. So like give
Right.
yourself a little bit of grace, but like having that understanding can kind of help start to build up kind of those walls and guardrails.
So why is there like a bigger focus on women than men for in this behavioral psychology?
Yeah, oh my gosh, there's so much. I mean, like I wrote about this in a couple newsletters ago, but like for example, the beauty industry. A
Hmm.
lot of that is companies
All right.
taking advantage of women's insecurities and marketing a solution to them as well. The same can actually be said, like, not just women, this also includes men, but like,
Yes,
we're in a
totally.
loneliness epidemic, right?
Hmm.
And I've talked a lot about this, like the loss of third places. And what has come in its place is like these paid spaces or like these products that are like,
Mm.
well, like make you less lonely if you pay the subscription fee. Again, it's, these huge companies, tech
Hmm.
companies that kind of create an issue and then monetize the solution. And so I think it goes back to, and women just purchase a lot more consumer goods than men.
Hmm.
The beauty
Right.
industry, especially, um, you know, even though obviously that's shifted over the past few decades, women are typically still the ones that like will run the household finances, purchase things for the households. So that's why if you see a lot of advertising, a lot of it is targeted at women because they are typically like the decision maker of the household when it comes to certain
Mm,
items. So just being aware again of like these forces, and it's crazy too because especially on social media these days it's very very difficult to know what an ad is and what an ad is not, like it's so embedded in so much of the content, so it just your brain just you're getting flooded with information constantly, so it's very hard for your brain to discern like, oh, this is like just fully an ad and this is just regular content.
Wow. I'm
oof.
panicking right now. Not gonna lie. On the inside, it just feels like it's so hard to predict for the future and plan for the future. Like, things are going well right now, but like, I can't even think that far ahead, in terms of what the world's gonna look like.
Totally.
And what am I supposed to buy? Am I supposed to be more like conservative and trying to like keep all my money to myself, or am I supposed to buy a few things that make me happy? I mean, I'll give you one example. Like, I got TSA pre-check, for example. That was
Hmm.
something I paid like $70 for, and that made my life way better. Honestly, I saved so
Yeah.
many hours, going in the plane, and so I don't think spending that money. I mean, I guess it's not necessary. I don't think it's a waste of money because it made me happier.
Yeah,
Is there
this
anything
is
like
actually a
that
great.
for you?
Oh yeah, this is a great thing that comes up all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So basically a lot of traditional financial advice, especially budgeting advice, is very predicated on just cutting out anything that is unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens then is it's almost like going on a diet where if it's so restrictive, it's harder to stick to long term. It doesn't make you happy and it's just like not sustainable and it doesn't bring you joy. And so that's why I'm very, very, an advocate for like what are your actual values, what actually like matters to you, and then you can kind of go into your budget and determine like, okay, this kind of stuff I can cut out, this kind of stuff makes sense to me. I mean, I'm generally a big fan of spending money on things that save you time.
Mm-hmm.
So like the TSA pre-check is a great example. I have TSA pre-check as
Mm-hmm.
well. But again, it can also be things that like are kind of frivolous that just bring you joy within moderation. Of course, it depends on kind of your budget, how much cash flow you have, but like
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. I have a local coffee shop near me.
Mm-hmm.
I live in New York City. The lattes are like almost $7 at this point. Like it's ridiculous. It's very expensive. I go there pretty frequently. I get my latte. You know, is that a kind of frivolous expense? I don't even want to add up how much that is a month. However, you know, I am friends with so many of the locals. I'm friends with the baristas there. It's a great community spot for me. It is kind of like a third place and it really like anchors my routine, brings me a lot of joy and connection. And so the outsized benefits of that, $7 latte for me is worth it. And I'm willing to kind of cut out other things from my budget to allow for this because, it provides that joy in my life. And I think a lot of people don't think through things like that when they're cutting out budgets. I mean, like the latte is usually the first to go. The eating out is the first to go. And I'm not saying that you should be spending like every meal eating out, but there are situations where that meal out is a point of community and connection. And I think we need that more than ever in like this kind of current climate that we're in that just feels
Yes.
very isolated and divided. And so that's why it's really important to think through. Like for me, it's pretty easy for me to cut out certain subscriptions. I'm pretty frugal when it comes to like I don't really shop ever. And like, but then I will go out to eat. I will go get that latte. So again, it's like kind of finding that balance with your budget.
The only thing I was thinking about was that your latte budget was higher than my transportation budget in London. But
It's bad. And
it,
but to be fair, I have a bike, so I don't spend any money on
There you go.
transportation. So I do
there you go.
have that, but it is like sort of ridiculous. Like it is a thing. Every time I pay for it, it's like I'm like this is ridiculous. But
Okay.
I mean,
can't
it's
let it go.
everyone has their own kind of like budget and their own kind of preferences to what kind of that
Yeah.
that they do want to spend on, which is fine. People shouldn't be too self-aware, too constantly stressed out about these little things, because in the end,
Hmm.
if you're just constantly depriving yourself of any source of happiness, what's the point? To be honest, at that point, like, why?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I see, and again, like not to be super fatalistic, but like obviously there's a balance between like thinking about the future, but then also enjoying your life. And I feel like a lot of people operate in
Yeah.
these two extremes where one, it's like, YOLO, I'm not going to put anything in my 401k. I'm just going to live like there's no tomorrow. And then there's the other side where it's like, I'm going to like live off ramen noodles and just save as much as I can and work 100 hours a week so that in this like kind of arbitrary point in the future, I'll like have freedom, which again, that might make sense for like certain groups of people, but there is a balance there because I think either extreme isn't good for anybody.
Hmm.
That's fair. You're
Yeah.
you're really good with money. You're smart about money. You've learned about this your whole life, and you still make sometimes things you say, "Oops, I made a mistake." I'm pretty
Oh yeah.
educated about money, and I bought a Labubu the other day, and I'm still cringing on the inside from doing that.
Yeah.
um,
Oh my god.
how and there are people that are celebrities that are successful that make millions and tens and hundreds of millions of dollars and then still make dumb money decisions and lose it all. I mean,
Yeah.
what is it about smart people that make dumb money decisions?
Yeah. Well, again, it goes back to this idea that it's so behavioral. And I think so many people just do not have guardrails set up when it comes to their
Mhm.
spending. And that leads them to make bad money decisions. So, like, again, you know, a great example is like, I try really hard not to grocery shop when I'm like hungry or tired because I'm spending like
Okay,
just way too much
good
money.
tip.
I'm just grabbing things off the shelves.
Hmm.
And again, it's like this idea of like knowing yourself, knowing, being aware of like when I'm making an impulse purchase, what is the trigger that's causing that impulse purchase? Like what emotion am I feeling? What kind of like void am I trying to fill with this purchase? I mean, a lot of times when we feel really emotional, we want to self-soothe, right? And so for a lot of people, that means spending money. Maybe it's like buying just like for me, maybe it's like buying a piece of candy at the bodega. For somebody else, it could be spending like going on a huge shopping spree. But it all comes back to that like typically rooted in anxiety and like wanting to self-soothe or just not wanting to
Hmm.
feel that uncomfortable
I
emotion.
see.
So once you kind of
Tickle.
are aware of like
Hmm.
what that uncomfortable emotion is that you're trying to solve, then you can kind of break that loop and like find other ways to kind of deal with that emotion without spending money. The
Wow.
other piece of this too is like I make dumb money decisions all the time. I don't want
Hmm.
anybody to think that I'm like perfect with money. But what I really try to do is make dumb money decisions with lower cost stuff. So like the great example is the candy in the bodega.
Hmm.
Sure, it's under $10. I'm not sweating too much about that kind of stuff. The bigger money decisions is when I very intentionally try to not make them out of impulse and try to be very intentional about them. So like for example, if I'm purchasing something over a given price point, like let's just say it's like $100 or $200, I will wait 24 hours before I make that purchase. And just creating friction between the like, I want to buy this thing and I'm actually going to buy this thing actually helps you, slow down your thinking process and, prevents you from making a decision out of like a ton of emotion. And so, again, like we're all human.
Hmm.
We're going to get decision fatigue. It's going to be really difficult if you have to do that slow down process for every single money decision you make. So the solution is to do it for the big stuff and not sweat the little stuff as much because it's just a more sustainable way to live.
Hmm. Is,
Wow. Said.
I'm curious about mentioning about the small stuff because I feel like, those kind of small payments that you constantly make, um, if they become like a habit, then you might end up actually racking up those small purchases, which you don't truly become aware of until you actually budget it and say, like, oh shit, I actually
Yeah.
spent, similar to like multiple subscription fees, for example.
Yeah.
If you're constantly spending $20 on like maybe five different subscription fees, it's
Yeah.
it's kind of
Hmm.
worse than making a $100 purchase, because in the
Yeah.
long run, that's ruining your budget.
That's a really good point. For subscriptions, I actually recommend looking at like thinking of it as a yearly cost. So like if you take something that's like $10 a month, if I'm
Hmm.
signing up for something that's $10 a month, I'm thinking I'm making a $120 purchase.
Hmm.
And that
Fair.
helps me prime that number in my head. And then I will kind of slow down and make that decision. Because the reason why subscriptions are so like sneaky is they use like mental accounting to like, oh, look at this small number. It's so easy
Hmm.
and simple. And so thinking about it in this, like the true cost of the subscription is often a lot
Hmm.
easier to think about it that way, and that will slow down your decision making, so that hopefully will help limit just signing up for a bunch of subscriptions. This is the same why like buy now pay later is like the worst thing ever. I
Hmm.
hate it. It's because it breaks it up into those small numbers and it looks really like, simple and easy and not that bad, and then obviously it adds up. And then for those smaller purchases, like again, I feel like the benefits outweigh the cons of like, instead of like spending so much time like being very anxious about every single money decision, like just letting some things go. However, I will say if, for example, after work every day, I'm really tired, I'm going to the bodega every day and buying candy, then I'm thinking, okay, clearly there's something like there's some sort of emotion or habit going on
Yes.
here that I
Hmm.
need to
Yeah.
address. But I try not to think too much about like, oh, I, went and bought this thing. It was $10. Like I just try not to stress out about that too
Hmm.
much. But then when it comes to those bigger purchases, I'm trying to be really, really intentional and like doing that cost benefit analysis because that'll be the big swings, kind of like going down the road. One last thing is a great example.
Hmm.
One of the biggest purchases you'll ever make in your life. Not everybody will do this, but a house.
Yes.
Some people will buy a
Hmm.
house. That is an unbelievably emotionally charged decision.
I
And
want
it
to.
is very, very easy to make impulsive decisions around buying a house
Mm.
because it's very wrapped up in like your idea of the future and security and all that. That is like the best example of like, you need to slow down. You need to find a way to bring the emotion out of it. And like, because I mean, this is like tens of thousands of dollars we're talking about that can like, you know what I mean? Like, those are the big decisions where you really should be try to be as objective and rational as possible in my eyes.
Hmm. Yeah, I love how you tie psychology to money because it really comes down from the psychology, what you want out of life, the way you perceive items, and yeah, talking about like Netflix and subscriptions. I mean, for me, what I do, I like to buy physical Blu-rays and media. I like to go thrift shopping, buying
Yeah.
movies, stuff like that, and I can cut out my subscriptions because one thing you talked about is owning things, right? If you subscribe to it, you can spend hundreds of dollars and actually get nothing out of it. You have nothing, and I feel like that's a huge issue where we're just always borrowing things, renting things, subscribing to things, and we end up with nothing. I mean, I do want a house because I think that's something you own, and that's wealth. But
Hmm.
it just seems really hard to get there. But I don't know. I feel like we're so
Yeah.
obsessed with renting. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think I agree. I mean, I have different opinions about like the renting versus owning debate
Hmm.
that we for a home that we can get into. But I do completely agree that there's been like we're entering like a generation of renters where
Hmm.
people are renting their clothes, they're renting their
Cars.
furniture.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that to me is problematic because one, it just leads again to this larger issue of consumerism, and like the quality of items have gone down, so you have to replace things more frequently, and like it just kind of, and it also like really reshapes people's relationship to owning things, and to taking care of their items. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm sure we've all rented an apartment before. You care a little bit less about like you're pouring
Hmm.
oil down the sink because you're like, this isn't my home. So again, it's kind of that same idea of like the way that you're treating your stuff, and the way that you're interacting with your environment, and just like viewing ownership is like shaped, and that in turn shapes like the entire economy and how
Yeah.
people's relationship to
Hmm.
things in that sense.
Wow. And to yourself too. Like if you take care of your house, right, you're gonna feel better. That's
Yeah,
psychology, you know?
definitely, definitely,
Um,
definitely.
One thing you talked about too is like inflation and how that's affecting friendships, like the
Hmm.
money issues between friends. Yeah, I have friends that make more money than me or less money than me, and it's hard to find things that we can all do together. Like, um, I might want to go to a concert and spend 50, $60. For some people, they can't afford that. For other people, they're like, "Oh, I'm going to Coachella. Do you want to come?" I'm like, I don't know how
Yeah.
you're affording Coachella,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
do you see that as like even separating us even more and more?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we're in a period of like rampant wealth inequality, like even over like the past 5 years. But I think even, and like this is like kind of my like soapbox issue about like the loss of third places, which are like
Hmm.
affordable or free places that you could hang out in your community. And there's like so many benefits to this, because one, you get to like build community and hang out with people without spending money or spending a ton of money.
Hmm.
But two, those places tend to be much more diverse, especially like socioeconomically diverse. And
Hmm.
it's actually very important for like the social fabric of kind of our communities to be in interaction with people that are not like you. And so what we're seeing is like this rise of like, I was saying before, like paid spaces, like members clubs, wellness
Right.
clubs. And then also just the price of things have gone up. So it's become more and more expensive to like hang out with people. And so I agree that it does kind of build like this inherent separateness between groups. And when you're in these members spaces, or like even just like hanging out in like more expensive spaces, those spaces are just naturally going to be less diverse.
Hmm.
And then that brings down like the diversity of ideas, and like it's this like whole other thing. But I do think that it is a big issue. I mean, I think everybody feels it. Like there's all these think pieces of like Gen Z like hates going to bars, I hate drinking. And I'm like, that could be part of it. I'm sure there's like a wellness piece. I think a
Hmm.
lot of it is like they just cannot afford to go
Afford
out. They
it.
can't
How much
afford
that
to
cost?
go out and spend like $20 on a cocktail. Like I think that is actually kind of how simple it is.
Hmm.
And, you know, I'm not saying it's like necessarily the business's fault for charging that amount of money. I'm sure there's like plenty of reasons why they do this, but I think it is like this larger issue. And if you think about like other cultures, like in Europe, they have a really
Hmm.
strong cafe culture,
Hmm.
a strong like pub culture where, they brought down the kind of price point of those places so people could kind of interact with each other. And it was just like a net good thing for the community. And so, when you're navigating money with your friends, and again, the reason why this also just becomes more difficult is it's still sort of taboo. People don't like to talk about it. People don't like to think about it in
Hmm.
their own life, let alone talk about it with somebody else. And again, because people equate their money with their like self-worth and sense of self, it can be a shame inducing thing, or like an anxiety inducing thing, and they
Hmm.
don't want to kind of talk about that with other people. But I'm always an advocate for just like being as upfront as possible. If you are that person that's getting invited to Coachella, asserting your boundaries as much as possible. Like, hey, I can't afford that right now, or maybe ever. So
Ever.
like, I'm gonna have to skip on that. And even in my own community, just being a lot more open to like, let's do something free. Like
Hmm.
let's not go get like, like I said, I live in New York.
Hmm.
You can have a mediocre dinner for like $100. Like, what if we did something else? And so just like starting to normalize the idea of like
Oh,
free and affordable activities, and like going and doing that is like a
Hmm.
great, just like net good for your friends and also the community.
Hmm. Yeah, these are issues that need to be solved for sure. You have the
Yeah.
pulse. Um, So a huge issue is comparison. I mean, I remember when social media
Mhm.
came out when we were younger. It was like, oh, cute photos of friends, and it was still a bit weird. But now it's full on. Like, I go on social media, I see people going on vacation, I see people having families, I see people going to concerts and places that I want to go to, and I'm not because I can't afford it. So, what's that doing to my brain? Um, is that making me like trapped mentally? Am I sick because of the comparison and lifestyle
I
creep?
don't I think what you're feeling is like what so many people are feeling, and it's very, very normal. So I
Mm-hmm.
always say that wealth is relative. There
Mm-hmm.
is no objective measure of wealth. If I am making $100,000 and I'm my entire community is making like $50,000, I will feel wealthy in comparison. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm only hanging out with millionaires, I'm going to feel poor.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's very dependent on your community and your reference group. And so back in the day before social media, your reference group was like kind of the people directly around you,
Mm-hmm.
that you kind of saw every day, your neighbors. Like that's how the whole like keeping up with the Joneses became a thing. Now that we have social media, we have like unfettered access to tens of hundreds of thousands of people a day. And so again, the reference pool is expanding. And on top of this, two things. One, like I was saying before, it's very, very easy to fake wealth online or
Mm-hmm.
to give a perception of wealth that is not fully rooted in reality. The other piece is that the algorithms reward a lot of this very aspirational content. So, a lot of times, even like in our media, like if you think about like the very popular TV shows that are out right now, like White Lotus, it's, glamorizing wealth, like extreme, extreme
Mm-hmm.
wealth. And so I think you have the media, you also just have what you see on social media. I think the algorithms reward a lot of this very, very wealthy aspirational content. So again, then your reference point shifts and you start to think that, you know, having $1 billion is normal and even feasible when newsflash, it really is not for most people.
Mm-hmm.
and and again, it's like, and that's where you kind of get these skewed perceptions of like what it means to be financially successful. I always point out that like the median income in America is around like $60,000.
Wow.
And I think a lot of people have this perception. I think I don't want to misquote a survey, but I think I saw a survey about like how young people graduating college expect to be making like $100,000 a
Right.
year. And again, it like comes back to this really, really skewed perception of like what is normal because they're seeing online, something that again isn't fully rooted in reality.
And that maybe explains why so many kids want to become YouTubers or athletes, stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. The
As opposed to a
the
doctor or
idea
something.
of yeah, that's actually something really interesting that I've also written about in the
Mm-hmm.
past is that, um a lot of young people especially believe that the kind of American dream is dead. And so I think that they've seen the kind of contract that their parents followed, which is like, okay, you work somewhere for X
Mm-hmm.
amount of years and then you retire and you have a pension. That's kind of gone. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of uncertainty. We're seeing the rise of like gig work and like the idea of having to have multiple streams of income, having to have multiple side hustles. And then again, they go online and they see people that are posting aspirational content under the idea of like, I'm a content creator. And so I think that's why we're seeing a lot of young people see like entrepreneurship and being an influencer as the only way to actually build wealth in America. And I think, as I've written about before, that leads to a lot of really perverse outcomes, like the rise of like scamming and grifting, which we like see all the time online of like
Mm-hmm.
people peddling courses and I don't know things online in order to like become a millionaire, etc. And we also just see like also like nihilism, like people that are
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not gonna participate in the economy, or I'm gonna like gamble my money in like meme coins and day trading. And, you know, obviously all that is bad for like the individual person, like their money, because, a lot of times those don't actually lead to long-term wealth. But it also is bad for our economy. If like most of people's capital is going towards meme coins instead of like other companies like in the stock market, like that is really net bad for the general economy at large.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it even seems like the stock market itself is kind of fake because the stock market keeps going up no matter what happens in the world. Am I misunderstanding it? I
There's
mean,
I mean, I don't want to say always. I will say that there is an element of like vibes that comes with this hobby. And I do think that like there is this perception of like everything really is priced in. And I always tell people that because it is, I don't want to say impossible because there are people that do it, but
Hmm.
it is almost impossible to ever get a meaningful edge in the market. And if you are able to get a meaningful edge in the market, you're doing that over, if you take like Berkshire Hathaway, for example,
Hmm.
that's because they did it over 40 years. They were
Hmm.
able to get an edge in the market because they were so invested long term. It wasn't like they were day trading and in 6 months they
Right.
beat, you know. And I always say that like building wealth is often very unsexy and very boring. You're oftentimes just putting money in index funds and letting it sit there and staying patient and not looking at the ups and downs. But that is not exciting for people. They want instant gratification. They want to get rich overnight. They also are online seeing people saying that they got $1 million off of crypto in like 24 hours. And so they think like, oh, that's actually the only way to build wealth in this country. And so that's where we're kind of in the environment we're in now.
Hmm.
It's kind of, a couple people have referred to it as like a casino culture, a casino
Right.
economy, and it's very much like that.
And the apps kind of make it worse, like Robinhood
Oh yeah.
trading, right? Like every day you're checking your app, you're like, oh, buy, sell. And it's just like you're losing money probably, right? Over the long term. And it's
Yeah, I mean, the gamified
not
features
good.
are wild, and also, and like this actually is especially for young men. If you
Hmm.
think about like the way a lot of young men are participating in the economy, and like because
Hmm.
they're the primary drivers of a lot of this casino behavior, is like Robin, for example, like it has a community aspect. And a
Hmm.
lot of, if you think about like the male loneliness epidemic, a lot of young men want community.
That's a
So I
point.
think a lot of them kind of get into these kind of paths just through wanting to find community, whether that be on Reddit or Robinhood. And then, of course, there's that whole other element that's like tied into this, which is like sports betting, which is, I think, candidly destroying like an entire generation
Hmm.
of like their financial stability. It's like
Yes.
unbelievably concerning. And then you even take, a lot of these apps, like I think Robinhood actually might be getting into sports betting. Don't quote me on that, but that's what
Oh
I'm saying is
God.
like it's this complete
Hmm.
integration of it's really gambling because you don't have really any control over the outcome of sports betting
Hmm.
with something that is shouldn't be considered gambling, which is investing. So it's all very scary.
So,
Right.
since we're talking about the concept of gambling and like how it's influencing society a lot these days, what exactly is, like, in your opinion, the source of how gambling has become so prevalent in, current society and like affecting also like young men? Because it really seems like the Gen Z population, especially the male population of Gen Z, are much bigger gamblers in like
Hmm.
whatever way possible than their
Yeah.
families, than their parents.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there isn't like an individual psychology piece. I mean, gambling is a very psychologically addictive
Hmm.
action. That's why gambling addiction has been around for quite a while. However,
Hmm.
in the past, like what has changed in the past, like almost decade is access. So
Hmm.
in the past, if you really wanted to gamble, you would have to
Right.
go to a casino,
Right.
or sports betting especially was illegal in a lot of
Hmm.
places. So you really, it was like under the table, so it wasn't as accessible. And in 2018, the Supreme Court legalized sports betting in a lot of states. So now it is unbelievably accessible. Also, I'm sure you guys have seen this. You're getting inundated by ads.
So many
And
ads.
so, yeah. So again, it's like one of those things too, where like when you start to see something over and over and over again, your brain normalizes it and thinks that it's like okay. And you get social proof of like celebrities endorsing it. And so again, you have all this unfettered access, and then also this kind of ties into what I was saying before about this idea of like I think everybody, but I think especially young men do feel disenfranchised in the
Hmm.
economy. And so I think a lot of them are looking for ways to get ahead. And so I think that's why you're seeing kind of the rise of like young men getting into crypto and day trading. And I think we're seeing this in sports betting as well. But obviously, I mean, all of it is pretty dangerous because it's very, like I said, it's very hard to get ahead. But sports betting especially is very dangerous because, um, you know, again, you have almost no control over I think actually no control over the outcomes of these things. And then obviously this gets into prediction markets as well. And I think too, I think there was some stat about like a very, very small percentage of sports bettors make up like the lion's share of the playbooks of these apps.
Mm-hmm.
So these are these people that are addicted to sports betting, putting thousands and thousands of dollars into sports betting, losing that money, and then the apps are kind of like raking it in. And yeah, and I think, you know, I think it's contributing to like just a larger mental health crisis, especially among young men, because now you're introducing the element of like losing a ton of money, which often can be a trigger for like really intense mental health episodes, and just generally, you know, eroding the way people think about money and risk. Because again, and this goes back to gambling too. When you're gambling, a lot of times you are going through intense cycles of gaining and losing large amounts of money over a very short period of time. And that completely rewires how you think about money and risk. Like if you've been through a 24-hour period where you've lost like a couple $1,000s,
Wow.
that changes how you think about gaining money and losing money in the future. You're like, oh, what's a couple $1,000s? I've won that in a day before, and I think that really does rewire how people, take risks in the future and interact with the economy.
Just to tie this to a previous point that we were discussing earlier was, is this related or not at all to why women are mainly the ones who are controlling the spending within a family? 'Cause men are just pure
Yeah, I mean,
gamblers. It's like, let's just throw money away.
yeah, I mean, I do really do understand and empathize with a lot of young men because
Mm-hmm.
they are culturally conditioned to be the providers, right?
Right.
So I think for them, they feel a lot more pressure, I believe, generally,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of be the breadwinner, be able to support the household, etc. So again, that does put a lot of pressure on you to like make as much money as possible. You also are like getting conditioned online that you need to have $1 million or you're poor. So it's like, again, it's like all this cultural messaging. And I think for women too, though, I think obviously, like as I was writing about my newsletter, there are a lot of women that are starting to kind of work and take charge of their careers and stuff. There is this like going back to the whole permission thing where women feel like, oh, I can't like kind of get involved in that because like that's for men or whatever. So like just so
Mm,
much like gendered culture conditioning, negative on both sides, may I add.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like in fact affecting the way that people are kind of handling and thinking about money.
right. So these are the obviously the extremes. So
Yeah.
from what you understand, what would you say is like the middle ground in a relationship for, for the current gender roles, for the current generation? Like how should they budget? How should they partner together their finances? What's like the right way, or like at least the most suitable way for our current time?
Yeah. I mean, I'll start by saying it's like I don't want to give like the classic it depends, but it is very like personal to the people and the actual couple in the relationship. You know, each person when you are in a partnership with somebody, each person is coming to the table with completely different perceptions of money. And it's like
Right.
often based on how you were raised, cultural conditioning, just experiences you've had with money in the past. So people think about money completely differently. So the first thing you need to do is just understand like how the other person and yourself, like where those differences are, like how we both see money differently, how we want to use money. And I think that it's not like a saver and a spender can't get together. I kind of like balk away from kind of that generalization. But I do think that you need to be very aware of your like strengths and weaknesses when it comes to money. Great examples like maybe this is because of my career. I am like hyper organized when it comes to money. I want to know where like every single cent is. Like it just maybe because I
Mm-hmm.
skew a little bit more anxious, it gives me a sense of control when I just know what's going on. And, if I was dating somebody that was more avoidant with money, like I don't want to look at anything, I don't want to deal with it, that could be fine because then maybe I'm the one kind of managing that day to day. I feel that sense of control. I know where everything is. I think where there becomes to be a problem is like when you're not being honest with each other or yourselves,
Mhm.
or, you're starting to get into like financial infidelity. And that's kind of where gambling comes in, where, I'm sure there are a lot of instances where, you know, somebody is gambling money, maybe not being fully honest about like how much money or like kind of what the situation is, and that's kind of where you get into those issues. And it's just being like, I know we were talking about early in this conversation, how do I want money, how do I want to use money to live the life I want to live?
Right.
And that's how you can find out if you and your partner are aligned in that way. If your partner like really really values stability and like wants to buy a house, and you value flexibility and want to travel, like that's probably a disconnect you should address in some way, because that's gonna really affect kind of those bigger decisions you're trying to make with each other.
Hmm.
Can we more directly talk about these money scripts?
Yes.
Things from childhood that are affecting our spending, our saving habits.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah, we
explain
definitely
more?
can.
Yeah.
Yeah, so money scripts are basically unconscious beliefs that you have about money that often come from your childhood, like I was saying before, lived experiences with
Mm-hmm.
money. And there's a ton of them. Just a couple examples are like money is the root of all evil.
Mm-hmm.
Money doesn't grow on trees,
Mm-hmm.
or just like a really common one I see is just a scarcity mindset around
Mm-hmm.
money, like this belief that you're never going to make enough money no matter how hard you try, or that you're just never going to get ahead, you're never going to have enough, or you need to like hoard your money. And you know for a lot, like I said, a lot of it comes down to how you're raised, how your parents talked about money,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, how you kind of interacted with other people at a young age about money, and also like, you know, how you dealt with money. For example, like if people that have gone through like really sustained periods of unemployment or just have gone through some sort of financial catastrophe, that really does really affect your perceptions about money going forward. I mean, a lot of times you're going to have a really intense scarcity mindset about money because you're like, I've been through this traumatic event.
Mm-hmm.
I need to like hoard as much as possible. And so there's no, I mean, there's like, I've written about this before, but like, there's like money personalities and money types. And I think it's like helpful to kind of have that exercise, but it is so personalized to
Mm-hmm.
you, and kind of how you think about money. So like a great example is like, I skew on the kind of anxiety side of money.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a tendency to feel like, oh, I need to kind of hoard as much money as possible. I need to save as much money as possible. And it took a lot of work for me to unlearn, like, well, what am I saving this money for? Like, what are kind of my actual financial goals? And like, how do I want money to kind of help me? I used to be very, very fixated on like the number. Like when I reach this amount in my net
Right.
worth, I'm going to feel secure. And of
Mm-hmm.
course,
Never
you reach
happens.
it. And a lot of times you don't feel secure.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was a lot of unlearning and like kind of trying to figure out, okay, like what is actually like, what am I actually trying to do with my money? What is the
Mm-hmm.
amount of money I actually need to kind of live the life I want to live, and then kind of work backwards from there. But like I said, it's all works in progress. It's never
Right.
kind of, you set it and forget it. You're kind of constantly evolving with it.
There's
Mhm.
so much
I
like unlearning and then reprogramming your mindset when it comes to money, I think, and that's
Yeah.
why I really love the things you talk about because it helps us at least make it us aware of our money
Yeah.
habits. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You said something.
No, no, I think this is actually a crucial point to talk about more. So you talked about unlearning and unprogramming. So what are
Mm-hmm.
some maybe 5 tips that you can give that you can share on how
Hmm.
we can unlearn these bad behaviors, these this conditioning that we have in our head that we have to have this certain amount of money or this we have these expectations that we can't really fulfill.
Yeah. So the first thing is just like awareness, like just being aware that like this is emotional.
Mm-hmm.
There are so much emotions wrapped up in this. This is also probably very much wrapped up in your sense of self. I just like don't think people realize like how emotional money
Mm-hmm.
is, because I think a lot of the decisions we make, financial decisions we make, are on autopilot. It's they're just so unconsciously programmed. So again, awareness
Hmm.
too. And I talked about this before, getting super clear about your values, how you actually want to live your life, what's important to you, like making a hierarchy list, and then kind of like approaching your money from there. The third thing is like building those guardrails. So setting up like a decision framework of, like I was saying before, okay, if it's under this amount, maybe I won't worry about it. If it's over this amount, I'll be more intentional. Really curating your digital environment. Like I think it's
Mm.
really important to understand like the effects that, like I was saying before, like social media and just things have on you. Just like the digital environment has on you. So just like being really intentional about like who you're following, the type of
Mm-hmm.
content you're consuming, et cetera. And like I know obviously you won't always have complete control over that, but
Hmm.
there are times that, like, I don't know, you're just like scrolling on TikTok and then I look up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I this is affecting me. Like I need to get off of this,
100%.
just bringing more awareness there. And then I'm trying to think of like the fourth and fifth tip, talking about money more.
Mm-hmm.
It's never a good idea to suffer in silence. I think something I've really enjoyed about young, like Gen Z money trends, is they are a lot more vocal about money. And I think that's a great thing. I think it's really important to just like be very honest and transparent about how you're struggling with money, what your money goals are, like building in that accountability, I think is a great thing. And the last thing is maybe this is a little cliche, but like be kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like you are operating in a world that is by and large designed to get you to spend money. Like
Right.
truly, even like in your apartment on your phone, out of the second you step out of your home, like so just give yourself a little bit of grace and like understand just like how many forces you're working with. Like you're just one person in this world, like competing against all of these like crazy interests. And so just giving yourself a little bit of grace. I think what happens with people and money is they're like, oh, I'm bad with money. And then
Mm-hmm.
they kind of beat themselves up and then they self identify with being bad with money. And so it's really important to say, okay, you know what? I did this kind of dumb thing with my money. Tomorrow's a new day. We're just gonna kind of keep moving forward. And just like having that kind of like continual learning mindset and like just curiosity about your money is will prevent you from just like beating yourself up about it. Because again, like you're fighting against like companies spending billions and billions of dollars to like get you to spend money. So you got to give yourself a little grace.
Oof, I know, right?
True.
It's such a battle for just trying to control my own brain and mind, and
Yeah.
they're trying to warp me, but
Yeah.
not let them.
Listen.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I had a question to you about the ethics of making money. I know a lot of people are making money in not the greatest ways. Like we talked about gambling. Like for me, I've never gambled because I'm like, even if I make money, I don't feel good about this money that I'm making. And like another thing I see that I absolutely hate are like scalpers on the internet. Sorry, don't come for me, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
just like for me, like if someone is buying a concert ticket with bots and then reselling them for 5 times the price, I'm like, what value are you providing to society? None. And it's just a way for people
Yeah.
to make money without actually providing anything. I don't I don't like to think that like if the only way to make money is unethically. I think there are people that make things that make the world better, and there are good ways to make money. But what are your thoughts on
Yeah,
just
that's a great
mm-hmm,
question. I think part of this is a societal issue
mm-hmm,
where the policies and the way that our society is set up has created an environment where people feel like the only way they can get ahead is to make money in these like kind of scammy, grifty, unethical
mm-hmm.
ways. So it's not entirely on the individual to change these behaviors because the thing is like if you're giving someone the possibility like if there's a way to make money somebody's going to do it, right?
Right.
So it is really like a larger structural thing in this country. And again, America is very very capitalistic,
Mm-hmm.
and so just naturally out of that economic framework this kind of behavior will happen. And that's why it's really important like to advocate for policies that will like prevent people like these
Right.
bad actors from doing
Top
that.
down.
So that's kind of the first piece.
Mm-hmm.
But on an individual level, I mean, this does really come down to like your own moral compass and like your own sense of ethics and like what you think is right or wrong. And like I would encourage people to think about the kind of world they want to live in and try their best to not contribute to against that kind of
Mm-hmm.
vision. And so that comes obviously to the way you make money. That especially comes to the way that you spend money. I know people don't always feel like things like boycotts work, but I just maybe not even thinking about it in terms of like a collective boycott. Just think about it in terms of like how you want to spend your money and like,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, kind of putting your voting with your wallet, so to speak. And I think I think that'll make you feel better if that
Mm-hmm.
is aligns with your ethics. And I also think all these individual actions do kind of ladder up to this collective movement of like just making the world a better place. And I do think too, the last thing I'll say going back to the societal thing is like we're in a weird time of economic precarity. The economy, the job market isn't that great. I think a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people are struggling financially. And so when people are feeling more desperate, they are willing to do potentially more unethical things to make money because they
Right.
feel desperate. And again, that is a larger societal issue that needs to be addressed. And so I think it's like, there's things you can do individually, but I also think the other thing is like thinking about like, how can we call on like the leaders of our country to like
Right.
make the world a better place, so to speak,
The
if that's
system.
possible.
Yeah, if that's
Yeah.
possible. Um.
Yeah.
Okay. Our jobs are tied to our financial stability. A lot of people are
Mhm.
caught up in jobs that they absolutely do not like, but they feel
Yeah.
like, oh, if I leave this job, I'm going to be poor and struggle. What's the first
Yeah.
step?
Yeah. I would say you have to think about, you know, it's such a catch 22 because stability is important to a lot of people
Hmm.
in this country. Also, unfortunately, a lot of people's health insurance is tied up in their job. So that
Right.
is like, there are things to think about when it comes to that.
Hmm.
I always recommend, it's like, goes back to like, how do I want to use my money to live my life? What's important to me? And trying to find ways to make meaning in your life. And for a lot of people, I mean, again, because we live in a very capitalistic society, a lot of people derive a lot of purpose from their work. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That's completely fine. But I
Hmm.
do think that it is important to try to identify and think about other ways to find meaning in your life outside of work. And, you know, people always say like, oh, if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. That might not be the current reality for a lot of people. And I'm not necessarily saying everybody should like quit their jobs and like try to go follow their passion because that might not be the best financial decision. Again, it comes down to like that pro con analysis of like, do I really value stability? Like, what makes sense for me right now? And then if you are in a position where you're like, I need to have this job for stability, but it's not bringing me fulfillment, what are some ways that you can find fulfillment and
Mm.
meaning outside of your job, and then maybe you can actually use the money you're making to like help support that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Saeed, anything else? I know we're wrapping up on time soon, but I have one or two more.
Um, I
Yeah.
kind of wanted to, since we're talking about like employment and job security, um,
Mhm.
what advice would you give to people, like especially new graduates who are currently facing, like a white collar job crisis at this
Yep.
point? I mean, so
Yeah, that's a great question.
where do they go
Yeah,
from there?
I don't know. I mean,
It's
it's
very
also
tough.
complicated. I mean, again, it goes back to this idea of like, the old playbook is
Mhm.
just not in play
Yeah.
anymore. There's just so many moving parts. Um, Rely on other people as much as you can. I think
Hmm.
in this job market, like those personal connections are what can really help you.
Mhm.
Try to be as flexible as possible. Um, Also give yourself some grace. Unfortunately, I don't really have the answers. I think like everything is just so fluid right now in the economy, but um, just trying again. I think like the personal connections are we getting there. Like I think you hear about people like, oh, I use AI to apply for 100 jobs. That's probably not going to be the most fruitful use of your time. I
Mhm.
think like making those human connections. I'm not saying, and like when I graduated college, I went through the same endeavor. I was unemployed for 6 months, and not every person I talked to on the phone, directly led to a job, but it did help me kind of build that network that I have today. That is really helpful. I will just have to say I do have to jump pretty
Okay.
soon, but I'm
Sounds
happy to take
good.
Oh
whatever
yeah.
questions you.
Yeah, sounds good. Last one about retirement.
Cool.
Something we'd love to
Yeah.
all do in the future. What do you think of the fire movement? Retiring early, or do we even have a shot at retiring at all?
Yeah. So that's a great question. The fire movement. So I'm a fan of any any way people can help like build quote unquote financial freedom in their lives. However, I am not a fan of people closely tying up their identity with money.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that it leads to a really dangerous path. And I think the downside of the fire movement is you associate yourself with extreme saving. Like that becomes your identity. And that's why I think a lot of fire adherents struggle to then spend their money later in their life because they have for so long identified as somebody who saves a ton of
Mm-hmm.
money and like doesn't spend any money. And I think too, like there is like that isolating factor of fire. I think now we're seeing fire be used in a more sustainable way, like coast fire. And I think that's actually a great way to do it, where like you're not saving as like aggressively. You're still kind of enjoying your life, but you are, obviously saving a lot more than the average person. So I do like the fire movement, and that I do think it gets people to start thinking more about like kind of building in financial freedom over their life. And also it has that community aspect, but like kind of like any money movement, it can just skew into just something that can be like psychologically damaging.
Fair. Saeed,
Um,
anything else?
no,
Awesome
I'm good.
podcast. We covered all the grounds.
Yeah, this was a blast, guys. I had so much fun.
Thank you, Hannah. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks
guys for
everyone listening. We made it to 15K subscribers. Woot woot! And
Cool.
until our next milestone, Saeed.
guys. You know how we sign out. We said it to cover the camera, and peace.
Ciao.